We are a nonprofit based in Bristol, Virginia, and our mission is to help transition Appalachia to a more resilient economy and a healthier population. And we do that by supporting local agriculture, exploring new economic opportunities, and connecting people to healthy food. And so this series was actually originally planned as an in-person workshop series to serve our local community in Central Appalachia, but due to the current ongoing health crisis, as you're well aware of, I'm sure, we transitioned to a virtual setting in hopes of reaching even more people. And we think that information on herbal remedies and all of this information on value-added products as well is valuable to everyone, especially right now. And in the health crisis we have going on. And so some of the other work that ASD does in the agroforestry department is the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub that is attached to the Appalachian Harvest Food Hub. And the Herb Hub reflects ASD's commitment to our local community and to the special plants we care for here. And so this it's a shared use facility, and it enables local farmers to bring sustainably cultivated herbs to market. And we, through sustainable growing and harvest training, we offer cost share opportunities and shared use processing equipment. And so we can then collect and market their supply to larger buyers, wholesale buyers. And so your participation today and then potential donation at the end, the GoFundMe link is also in the chat, allows us to continue the work that we do and offer further assistance to even more farmers of Appalachia. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you guys for joining us for this little webinar. This is really awesome that you guys are getting empowered to be better herbalists. So I'm going to talk about the Cottage Law, which the most basic breakdown of the Cottage Law is just, I'm in Tennessee, I don't know where everybody else is, but it varies state by state. The most basic breakdown of the Cottage Law is that it is just a law that is put out on a federal level, but is broken down into state level, differences that allows people to produce items in their own home. So that is very limited. That means that you need to first meet a requirement of having a home and having a kitchen. That kitchen has to have a sink, running water, and electricity. You cannot have any pets in your home to be able to qualify for any form of cottage law. So even if you have a hamster that lives 3 doors down in the living room, you still can't qualify for the cottage law. You just cannot have any pets in the home at all. Secondly, all of the items that you make in your cottage law under the cottage law anything that you make in your home has to be pre-approved by the cottage law. So the things that you can make under the cottage law safely is including, not entirely limited to, any type of non-hazardous food items. The USDA labels these as baked goods, and baked goods that would ideally be shelf stable for about 2 days. So that means that like a pizza would not count. You can't just leave a pizza out on the counter for 2 days and expect it to be okay. So things that are not heavily saucy, have a lot of dairy in them, cheese, stuff like that, it would need to be something that would ideally be shelf stable for a couple days. Any type of home canned jams, jellies, marmalades, anything that is made with a lot of sugar and naturally high acidic fruits. Those are you can qualify to use those in your, make those in your home. You can also make dry spice mixes, granolas, candies, anything that would be like shelf stable, that wouldn't involve a lot of processing, it wouldn't involve a lot of storage. This does not cover any low acidity canned foods like green beans or acidified canned foods like pickles and tomatoes. So those are the main things that are covered under the cottage law. Of course, all of these things need to be very well labeled, and the FDA does have guidelines out for this. I believe it's on your little participant guide, all the way at the bottom under resources. There's FDA labeling in one of the links that will give you a lot of information about how to label cottage food items. If you just Google cottage food law in your state, it should bring up a good resource called pickyourown.org. That's also listed in your resources, and that will have a lot of information about how to label your cottage food product, as long as, of course, you've made it in the correct type of kitchen with no pets, and you've made it to all of the standards that the cottage law has laid out. So that is what it covers. So let's move into how that applies to herbalism or herbal products. All of my experience is mostly dealing with people who are trying to bring things to farmers markets in particular. So I'm going to kind of more speak towards that, because that's how a lot of us get started. That's how a lot of small businesses pop up, is through local things like that. So the way that you would be able to use herbal products legally through the cottage law would be to have, if they really would only qualify if they're used in an approved finished food product. For example, if you use rosemary, it would need to be like in a rosemary bread that's been baked and is shelf stable for a couple days, or dandelion jelly, because that is a high acidity food product. It's had a lot of sugar. That's a qualifying item for the cottage law. Or, for example, lavender candies, because you can make candies under the cottage law. So unfortunately, the cottage law really doesn't protect herbalism very much at all. It really just protects food items. You can use herbs and herbalism in your food items, but you cannot label them as herbalist products or any type of medicinal product. It has to be a food item. So for example, if you made your lavender candies, you could not label those with something that speaks towards the holistic uses of lavender. For example, you couldn't call it calming candies. You would have to just call it lavender candy. That's, you cannot make any claims as to the intended purpose of that food item. Because as soon as you make any sort of claim, that's when it needs to be going through the FDA and through USDA. So these are things that you really have to be aware of when you use the cottage law, because you could get yourself in a lot of trouble trying to make claims or do things that could maybe get you in trouble later down the road by potentially, well, let me just move on to the next bit here. I know a couple of the questions that I have here, one says, who does the cottage law apply to? That applies to anybody that does not already have like an LLC, or I think it's just an LLC. I'll have to double check that, and maybe somebody else down the road would have better answers to that when Jeannie talks about the good manufacturing practices. But if you have an LLC already, you can't use the cottage law at your own home. So if you have your business license to do stuff in a separate facility, you can't be doing it at home and then selling it through your LLC business. Okay, so the, sorry, I've got a bunch of notes all over the place, but a big question that I had as a market manager was for herbal tinctures. That's something that, oh, well, let me backtrack real quick, I'm sorry. But so using herbs, and I'm gonna assume because the name of this, this webinar is called Seed to Medicine Chest, I'm assuming that that means that you're growing a lot of these herbs yourself. So I do that, I'm a farmer. I grow all sorts of medicinal herbs, and I use those in cottage law baked goods and different items and things. But the instant that you have to dehydrate your herbs, that is something that you have to do in a certified commercial kitchen. So if you are wanting to take your fresh herbs and turn it into even something that is under the cottage law, like a dried spice mix or dried herbal tea, those things are under the cottage law. Unfortunately, the process of turning it from fresh
Uh-oh.
To dried is actually something that you need to do in your basement and hope that it dries, and then later. Oh, hello? Are we there?
Just a little bit of lag. I thought I might have lost you, but no, you're still there. All right, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a rule in farm market management that is basic. It's called like the one step, one snip rule. So that means that farmers can take things out of their garden using only one processing method, and that is harvesting. You cannot alter your produce in any way after harvest unless you do it in a commercial kitchen, certified commercial kitchen. So that means that you can't pick some corn and shuck it and then sell it at a farmer's market. You have to do that in a commercial kitchen. If you want to shuck it, you have to do it in a commercial kitchen. The same applies to herbal products. If you want to process that herb in any way, even to use in something that would be a cottage law approved item, you have to do that process in a commercial kitchen. So for example, if you are just buying a bunch of bulk herbs off of Amazon and they're from an approved source and they've been inspected, and you want to just make a dry spice mix or dry herbal tea mix at home with things that are already dried, that's fine, you can do that. But if you're growing it yourself and trying to process it from seed to, to the farmer's market table, you have to do that in a commercial kitchen. So really, all of this is just to say, really be cautious and protect yourself, because there's not a lot of recognition for herbal products in the USDA and in the FDA and in the health department community. None of that is really it's viewed very much as a food product. So a good example of a local business here in East Tennessee that kind of got around some of these issues was somebody who was making herbal syrups. She wasn't using the cottage law, but she was using a commercial kitchen to make herbal syrups and marketing it and selling it as a food item. So that, that's something that you can do, is you don't have to make food per se. You can make like an herbal extract and sell it as a food item, but you cannot label it with anything that makes any sort of medical claim. A big question that I got from a lot of people at the farmers market was herbal tinctures. Can I bring, even if I buy herbal tinctures, or dried herbal products from an approved source, or I dry it in a commercial kitchen, can I make an herbal tincture with that and sell it at the farmer's market through the cottage law? The answer is no. You actually can't even do that through a commercial kitchen. That's something that is way higher up. I actually don't even know a lot of the answers to that, but I'd be happy to get into that if anybody has questions. But at the end of the day, if you show up to a farmer's market with an herbal tincture, if a police officer walked through the farmer's market and saw your table, all they would see would be a little bottle of open vodka with some herb flavoring. So if you are selling alcohol extracted herbal tinctures without a liquor distribution license, you're going to jail. So it's very, very, be very cautious when you make tinctures, because that's something that you really, really, really cannot do without a lot of protection, a lot of study on that. People asked about maybe glycerin tinctures or oxymels, different types of ways of extracting herbs, holistic benefits, vinegar, different mediums that weren't alcohol. You can do that, but you have to do that through a commercial kitchen. You can't do that through the cottage law. So
could you, Donika, maybe go into how online sales differ?
Yeah, you can't
do cottage law?
No, you can't do any online sales with the cottage law. You can do online marketing and advertisement, Instagram, Facebook, paid advertisements, that type of stuff is fine, but you cannot make a portal on Square for your, cottage law made items. So, yeah, there's that's about it.
I did just
Unfortunately.
get another question in the chat, and just so you guys know, it is a little easier if you use the Q&A button instead of the chat so it doesn't get lost. But this question says, why can folks make vanilla extract and sell it at farmers market without a liquor license?
They can't. If they're doing that, they could potentially go to jail. That's really dangerous, and they shouldn't be doing that, is the honest answer. So I know that's difficult to hear when it's something that you maybe want to do yourself, but you know, making these herbal tinctures and things. But I've been a farmer's market manager for a long time, and especially just looking at the risk side of it. Like I said, you know, a police officer could walk up and say, that's a little open bottle of vodka with vanilla flavoring. You know, it doesn't protect you to call it a medicine that actually can make it a lot worse. If you're calling an herbal tincture some sort of medicinal thing, because anytime you have to write a dosage on a bottle, you immediately become liable for the person who's taking that to, you know, if they poison themselves of their own volition with your herbal extract that you made at home with alcohol, because that's very possible. Herbs are very powerful. We all know that. So it's just better to treat herbs and all of the processing ways of dealing with herbs with a lot of respect and a lot of carefulness, because you ultimately could find yourself in a lot of trouble.
All right. And on that note, so I know you mentioned if you have an LLC, you can't use your kitchen, but this question I think needs a little clarification. If you have an LLC, can you produce tinctures, syrups, or ciders in your home for sale online or in farmers markets?
No, not if that tincture. No, there's no way. I'm sorry. It's the only way that you would be able to make any sort of tincture, herbal syrup, oxymel, glycerin tincture extract. The only way you can do that would be to do it in a certified commercial kitchen, with the exception of the alcohol. You cannot even do the alcohol in a certified commercial kitchen. So you would need to find a commercial kitchen in your area to rent. And I'm still not even sure about the legality of selling that online. I'm actually not entirely sure of that, but I know for a fact that you cannot do any of that in your home, because that is, even though it's shelf stable, it does not qualify as a non-hazardous food item, because if you drink a whole bottle of said extract, it will make you a lot sicker than if somebody ate an entire loaf of my rosemary bread. You know, so just yeah, it's just limiting access to, or limiting the ability to yeah. So sorry, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but that's really the most safe answer, is to avoid those types of things unless you go through, and we're segueing into this part when the FDA gets involved, and hopefully that I guess hopefully we'll be able to cover that more later on down in the webinar. But as for the cottage law, which is what I'm more confident speaking to, the only way to use herbs in your cottage law kitchen is through the approved food products, if they end up in a finished approved food product that the cottage law does cover. And especially with COVID-19 happening right now, I've encouraged all of my farmers that I work with to be extra cautious, even with the cottage law. If they're making baked goods and selling it out of their home, and they wind up, you know, testing positive for COVID, and then somebody that purchased from them does, they could get blamed for that. And I don't believe that the cottage law would be able to help a whole lot in that situation. So, you know, just taking into account, you know, everything that could possibly go wrong. I know that's a horrible way to look at things. You know, it's just much safer to use herbal products only in a way that it will end up in a finished approved food product if you're using only the cottage law to protect yourself.
Gotcha. So to summarize, it sounds like cottage law is very, very specific, and it covers only basically food-based items. You can't make these claims about herbal remedies as you could if you were doing it in a commercial kitchen. And also making sure that you understand that every state is going to have very different, in some cases, cottage laws. And so while it may not be applicable in your state, we are going to go over a little bit more what good manufacturing practices are. If you did, you can kind of decide at what level you want to get involved in this industry and what that.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to just add real quick to clarify. You said that the cottage law would be, you couldn't use it in the same way that you could a commercial kitchen to make any sort of claims about its uses. You can't even do that with a commercial kitchen. You cannot make any sort of claims about the intended finish or the intended result of your product. So you can't say that this herbal product will help with cough or cold or whatever it might be. The way that I've told all of my people that use commercial kitchens to produce herbal products would be to educate your client, your customers separately from what is labeled on your product. So for example, setting out a bottle of herbal syrup that you made in a certified commercial kitchen legally as a food product, and then next to it have a info sheet that says, these are what these herbs are known by science to do for your body and for your holistic health. So not putting it on the label, not making any claims on that label saying this is good for you for this ailment, but educating separately. Sorry, I didn't cover that before. I didn't mean to interrupt, but that is really important to understand, that you cannot make, even in a commercial kitchen, you cannot make any claims on that label for anything to do with medicinal purposes, unless it's that's much higher level than I'm accustomed to dealing with. So I'll stop there, but thank you guys. Hope if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me and I'll do my best to expound on those things.
Yeah, and so just to clarify on that, labeling, extremely important. There is a link on the handout that you were provided. It's also in the chat about labeling, but it's all very specific. And so here's one last question for you, Donika. I know you probably have to run, but can you process your own herbs into salves and other non-food items and sell those at markets? And then it says /online without a certified kitchen.
Okay, sorry I didn't cover cosmetics before. A really good resource on, so the cottage law does not cover cosmetics whatsoever. It's only applying to food items. So when it comes to that type of stuff, that is actually through the USDA. I don't know a whole lot about that, but I know that you can make herbal, like non-herbal cosmetic products in your own home without using a certified kitchen, example for dehydration, as far as I know. But I'm not going to speak entirely to that. A good resource for you to check out is Marie Gale, M-A-R-I-E, Gale, G-A-L-E. And she has a website, mariegale.com. She's a whiz at cosmetic labeling for farmers markets. I'm not exactly sure about the online sales answer either. I apologize about that, but the general consensus is that cosmetics are, they have to be labeled in the same way that your food products do, with your name and address, the ingredients by weight, the total weight. They have to be labeled like a food product, but they aren't held to the same standards, and they're a little bit easier to work with. So again, labeling, really huge deal. You cannot make a salve for bug bites and say this is anti-itch. That's something that the FDA has to evaluate. But you can say skin salve, you know, and then have separate information on the table next to it saying, you know, these herbs that are in this skin salve are ideal for helping with bug bites, for example. So.